Burgundian blood. Society is composed of 3 estates. The first estate is the clergy, traditionally divided into higher and lower clergy. The upper clergy were the clerical nobility and born into the second estate before they became popes, bishops, cardinals, abbesses, etc. These second sons and daughters of noble families were used to secure power in the church. The second estate is nobility and, technically, though not in common use, royalty, other than the monarch/duke himself, who stood outside of the system of estates. The second estate is traditionally divided into nobility of the sword, and nobility of the robe. The second estate constituted of about 1.5% of the duchy population. The second estate were exempt from ducal forced labor and from most other forms of taxation. This exemption from paying taxes led to their reluctance to reform. The nobility of the sword are the oldest and most prestigious, a knightly class, owing military service to the duke in return for the possession of feudal landed estates. Their title derives from the right of such noblemen to bear a sword, where nobles of the robe do not carry this right. Nobles of the sword generally were not recognized as such unless his family had held this status for at least 4 generations. The nobility of the sword also provided non-military services to the duke, holding positions in all branches of government. Knights are the lowest form of nobility and do not come with titled lands. Their station is below the titled lords such as a baron, therefore they do not carry a formal title. Men are often awarded this title for their bravery, courage and service to duke by participating in battles, crusades, and other types of militant service. They are the largest population of nobility and spend their lives trying to earn a fiefdom and financial security. The station of knights isn't necessarily inherited by law, but it was common for the son of knights to follow in their father's footsteps to secure more power and eventually title over generations. The newest type of nobility, those that came into the nobility through their own merit, by being appointed to various judicial or administrative offices, and later members buying the offices which carried such status. This angered the nobles of the sword, who saw their own opportunities being lost to the bourgeoisie. The third estate comprised all of those who were not members of either of the above and can be divided into 2 groups, urban and rural, together making up over 90% of the population. The urban area included wage laborers. The rural included free peasants, those who owned their own land, who could be prosperous and villains, serfs, or peasants working on the noble's land. The free peasants paid disproportionately high taxes compared to the other estates and were unhappy because they wanted more rights. In addition, the first and second estates relied on the labor of the third, which made the latter's inferior status all the more glaring. It was extremely rare for people of this ascribed status to make it into another estate. Those who did so managed as a result of either being recognized for their extraordinary bravery in a battle or entering religious life. A few commoners were able to marry into the second estate, but this was a rare occurrence and generally happened with the bourgeoisie, as their wealth would bail out noble families from ruin and collapse. This was socially frowned upon by the second estate. The maintenance or re-establishment of peace and prosperity depended on the fostering of mutually advantageous relations between the Duke and his urban subjects, at least the most influential among them, the bourgeoisie. The apex of urban society was occupied by a small elite whose wealth and dominance of municipal office marked them out from the rest of the population. The bourgeoisie took their power with the economic expansion of urbanization, with their self-organization into guilds. Guilds arose when individual businessmen, such as industrialists, urban landowners of old standing, craftsmen, artisans and merchants, organized against their greedy feudal landlords, nobles, who often demanded more than their share, and created a new capitalist class to challenge the nobles economically and resourcefully. Furthermore, the bourgeoisie expanded their minds in the forms of education, reaching prominent roles of lawyers, magistrates, notaries, scholars, and academics in the budding new formation as they acted in self-interest and politically sought new heights outside of their traditional stationary positions. The smallest population and most elites of the bourgeoisie have their eyes set on the awarded title of the nobles of the robe, attempting to claim their papers within their lifetime or within multiple generations. The nobility have always been lawless, untouchable unless by a higher authority such as the duke or a monarch, and above all the church. Their grotesque abuse of power and many awards is protected by their inherited or granted rights. In the eyes of the nobles, the bourgeoisie threatened their domain and the good life they have. Who were these bourgeoisie? Common men and women, these grotesque social climbers that did not stay in their lane. The small elite of the bourgeoisie may have gained the upper hand in the power of urban wealth, education, and other lifestyles that mimicked nobility. But from the noble perspective, they would not let the line yet be blurred and always found an opportunity to remind these social climbers of their place, even when seeking out an alliance with the bourgeoisie. The nobility would never admit that they were being weakened by urbanization, and from their perspective, the bourgeoisie were only allies when they could serve their purpose. But in reality, who really was the pawn?